Okay. So this
Okay,
session is on the biological rhythms in sleep. Um, Divya, would you like to go first or me go
sure.
first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Okay, so sleep is very essential to human function. It is really important for immune function, growth hormones, memory, consolidation. So it is a really important function that we need to have every night. How do you want to go like slide by slide, or do you want to just Arthur?
Oh, so, like every other, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
All right. So sleep has many functions. Main being memory consolidation, for things that we learn to improve our recall and retention of information, um, learning different skills, and consolidating that. Um, and that's mostly done during REM sleep, which is our active um, learning. And we also consolidate declarative memory tasks, so complicated motor skills um, are done in slow wave sleep. And REM is not absolutely necessary for memory and learning, but it does definitely help. So that's why they always say get a good night's sleep after studying before your exams, because that'll always give you a benefit.
So, as we've discussed, sleep is really important for many bodily functions. So, when you don't get enough sleep, you do experience symptoms of sleep deprivation, which include having an impaired or long-term effects of sleep deprivation include having impaired immune systems, having an increased risk of heart disease and diabetes, growth suppression, increased risk of obesity, you would also have like irritability, cognitive impairment. There are a lot of things that could happen if you don't get enough sleep. So it's really important that you do.
So sleep also has a lot to do with the daytime and nighttime, which is our circadian rhythm. Sometimes you might feel that sleeping in the middle of the day as opposed to having a good night's sleep um, doesn't give you the same quality of sleep. We do have a cycle in which we like to sleep at night, and we'll get further on to why that is. But within our bodies, we have multiple rhythms, and circadian, meaning day, usually means circa, which has to do with the sun. Something that takes a day would be our sleep and waking. Our body temperature goes up and down throughout the day, our making of electrolytes and releasing hormones. But then we also have less than a day rhythms for ultradian. So we eat more than one time a day, so that's shorter. We breathe and our heart beats and our nerves impulse actually very quickly in relation to a day. So that's less than. And then we have infradian, so things that are greater than a day, like female menstrual cycles, the seasonal variations, that's 4 times a year, and other things like development and aging, which is your whole life. So these cycles are pretty much the three categories that we go about when we talk about any life's
The suprachiasmatic nucleus is a nucleus in the brain that controls circadian rhythms. And as Arthur talked about before, circadian rhythms will control different processes in the body like sleep, alertness, hormone levels, body temperature, etc. And the neurons in this nucleus are regulated by light. So when your retinal cells pick up light, they will activate or inactivate the SCN. And then that's how the SCN mediates what part of the circadian rhythm you're in and what your body should respond to.
And just since it's not directly mentioned, SCN is the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So this is an example of our circadian rhythm. Starting over here, we wake up middle of the night or towards 4. We have our lowest body temperature. Average person starts to wake up about 8 o'clock, and that's normal for a normal wake up because our melatonin stops to secrete. Other proteins and systems are going on, such as intestinal activation. Mostly men, but females do have a little bit of testosterone as well. Then we have certain secretions throughout the day, heaviest at certain periods of time, certain times later when it comes to about midday. We have our best coordination. Most people have fully woken up afternoon, and we're going to have our better reaction time until you get towards the night where we start to release our melatonin again, and that'll help to start shutting the body off and having a cycle restart over again. And we'll get more into melatonin in just a bit.
Mm-hmm. So the hypothalamus is where the SCN is kind of located. And there's a pathway called the retinohypothalamic pathway from the retinal cells in your eye to the hypothalamus, which has the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And like we said before, whenever the retinal cells are stimulated by light, that's when they're going to go and activate the SCN. And that's what they're showing here. And this pathway is what all our circadian rhythms are centered around.
And this is going back into melatonin. The pineal gland will be what releases it, and you can see the graph on the right that it's based on the light and day with the suprachiasmatic nucleus in our eyes, or we'll receive information from our eyes, and that's what signals to the pineal gland to secrete that melatonin. So within our cells, there are certain things that help create this clock, not just necessarily by light, but we do have an inside clock that runs genetically, and that's going to be through our expression of these genes and proteins being clock and cycle. They dimerize, and so that means that they come together and they form a transcription factor, which ends up um, I'm not sure if is it promoted? Okay, yeah. So they promote the production of cry and purr, which are going to be also transcription factors that will then stop the production of themselves, and they as well dimerize. So this cycle of one activating and then one deactivating these genes leads to a natural 24 to 26-hour cycle that is regulated within the cells themselves, ignoring the fact that other systems run on the light that we see.
Right. So electroencephalograms are these recording devices that record electrical activity in the brain. And based on the results of these EEGs, you can tell, like based on the waves that you see, you can tell which stage of sleep a person is in. REM sleep is short for rapid eye movement sleep, and it has a really small amplitude, fast EEG waves. So little line, like little high frequency lines. And in this class of sleep, you'll have muscle paralysis and rapid eye movement. In a non-REM sleep, you can see much larger wave cycles, kind of, as we'll see in the next slide. And your muscles are not paralyzed in this stage of sleep. So as you see here, these are the different sleep stages. Stage 1 is the stage between sleep and wakefulness. Your muscles are active, your eyes are still moving. In stage 2, your eyes will dart back and forth. In stage 3, this is when it is considered SWS, or slow wave sleep, characterized by delta waves. And as you move through stage 4 and as you move through stage 4, that's when your sleep is getting deeper and deeper, and you see how the waves are changing. You see mostly delta waves in stage 3 and 4, as opposed to theta waves from stage 1 and 2. And this will gradually transition into REM sleep, over here shown in the blue. And in REM sleep, most of your muscles are paralyzed, but your eyes will still move. And they'll be characterized by high frequency, short amplitude kind of waves that you see over here. And they're turned on by acetylcholine secretion in the brain, and they can be inhibited by serotonin.
Something that might also be a good way to remember some of these things is that REM sleep is known as active brain, inactive body, while non-REM sleep is known as inactive brain with an active body. I have a question from Sarah asking if glutamate is something important in these slides. Is that correct? Well, they're actually not being activated. Like, these aren't necessarily neurons, so the neurotransmitter glutamate isn't playing a role in this right here. So these are transcription factors. They're just regular proteins found in and around the nucleus. They bind to DNA to either, in this way, it's promoting the activation of this DNA, so it's expressing itself more. And as it expresses itself, it produces other proteins that leads to the inactivation of itself. Obviously, cry and purr are doing other things in which influence the body to understand what time of the day it is. But basically, when we have higher activation of clock and cycle or higher activations of cry and purr, there's basically a gradient that is created, and other things are activated or inactivated due to that gradient and balance of the two kind of counteracting themselves. So that's each individually within cells. Since they're not communicating with each other, then they're not really, or since the cells aren't necessarily communicating with each other in this mechanism, then no glutamate or any other cell-to-cell transmitter is being used. So here's some more characteristics of the sleep cycles. As we can see, while we're awake and our eyes are open, we're having these beta waves, very sharp, very fast. When we start to close our eyes and enter into our first stage sleep, almost kind of just closing our eyes, we're getting, in between beta to alpha. We start to get into theta. We'll solidify ourselves into theta in stage 2, and we'll also experience these sleep spindles, which are these high spikes, um, bursts that are found and very characteristic of stage 2. And then we'll have stage 3, which is our slow wave cycle, or sorry, slow wave sleep, which are going to have these longer, slower, but usually taller wavelengths. And you'll notice that in REM sleep, we kind of go back to having this alpha and in between waking and stage 1 sort of brainwave activity found that's characteristic in for REM. See, our brain is active, but our body isn't, and that the brainwave expresses the likeness of being awake.
So, total sleep for a typical young adult is from 7 to 8 hours every night, ideally, and it's made up of sleep cycles that last 90 to 110 minutes each. So, just depending on how long you sleep, you're gonna sleep through more sleep cycles. Half of a sleep cycle is gonna be in stage 2. About 20% of it is in REM sleep, but you can see in this graph over here that as you sleep more, each cycle will have more and more REM sleep, which is really important because REM sleep is most of your memory consolidation.
Um, a key thing to note is the length of these general cycles being about an hour and a half long. So with this rapid eye movement sleep, this is actually where we have our most vivid dreams. It isn't necessarily our only dreams, but these are the ones that are the most impactful. They're full of um, emotion. They have a lot of visual imagery, sounds, smells, and um, this is usually when you wake up in the middle of the night from either a nightmare or a really great dream, that you're really experiencing this level of dream where it really feels very immersive. Sometimes you might also wake up in the middle of the night and you kind of had like a black and white dream, or like nothing was really going on, but you know that you were kind of dreaming. Those are the ones I found in the slow wave sleep, but usually we're going to characterize the REM with the active dreaming. And some animals actually don't really show our REM sleep. They're known to get relaxed, but they kind of stay in almost a two stage 2 type of sleep. Most characteristically, dolphins and birds, because they sleep on only one half of the brain while the other half of the brain is still awake, and that doesn't really allow one to get that REM sleep where you're having one side of the brain dream while the other one's awake. It just wouldn't be possible that way. But one side of the brain still does get rest by getting into the second and third stage sleep. And here's an expression of that, how in a dolphin you can see how the wavelengths on one side of the brain is different from the other. And they'll go on and off. Some other mammals like rabbits and giraffes, who are constantly in fear of predators, are going to sleep in small, tiny bursts, usually for like a few minutes at a time. Get to a safe spot, take a quick, tiny nap, and then go about their time. And then dolphins and seals, they'll kind of just come up to the surface, take a kind of more of a chill experience as opposed to being actively swimming and moving around. They'll kind of just hang around and let one of the brain's kind of hemispheres shut off and kind of get their sleep that way.
Okay. As we age, our sleep patterns will change. So during infancy, your sleep cycles are shorter and each of them have more REM sleep. About 50% of them are REM sleep. And this is really important because REM the rapid eye movement that happens in REM sleep is important to developing neurons. Could you go to the next slide? And as people get older, the amount of stage 3 sleep and the amount of overall sleep they have declines. So at age 60, you only spend half of as much time in stage 3 sleep as you do when you're age 20. And by age 90, stage 3 sleep has totally disappeared.
Okay, so this is sleep recovery, which is, say, you had to stay up all night studying for an exam, or you only maybe got like an hour's of sleep for that night. You didn't quite go through that many stages of sleep. You might have not even gotten to experience the REM for that night. So on night one, say stage 3 was the deepest you got, you were able to sleep an hour, maybe an hour and a half. Something that the brain does is it will recover. The second night, you are more likely to jump straight into, or a lot quicker into REM sleep, and you're more likely to have more REM cycles throughout that night to compensate for the previous night that you didn't quite get as many as you should have. So a lot of sleep deprivation happens when you're unable to make this recovery. You're unable to keep up with the correct number of cycles of sleep that you need for all of the benefits that sleep provides. And this is an experiment that they've done. It's not necessarily in your slides, but this is a great example of how sleep deprivation is so detrimental. A big thing that with this study did is this plate kept rotating and kept making these mice active, so they had to keep moving and didn't allow them to sleep. You could see that the rats started to lose body weight, even though they were constantly eating because they were constantly moving and staying awake. It was slow enough to where it's not like they were running the whole time, but it's fast enough to where they have to stay awake to keep up with it. So they were actually eating tons, and normally a rat, even eating at that pace, would gain weight. They were actually losing weight, and it really compromised their immune system. They were, starting to feel a lot of sicknesses like skin rashes and things like that, where normally it doesn't necessarily happen. But when you have a very compromised immune system, you can have some of these things happen. And on the bottom, we have something where humans can feel, which is insomnia. One specific one of those being fatal familial insomnia, where you can just get it in the middle of your life. You just end up having a really huge issue, start being unable to sleep. This can also happen sometimes if you hit your head in a very specific way. It has happened to some, where you can go months without sleeping, and from something as little as 7 months straight to 2 years without sleep, that can be enough to compromise the body to lead to death. Um,
Sorry.
I can talk about this one if you want.
Okay. Go for it.
Yeah, so this was also another experiment that was conducted where they were trying to figure out where in the brain is causing all of this sleep. And so you can see the dotted line in this image where they essentially are cutting some neurons to see what happens. And when you cut around this area below the medulla, you're essentially isolating the brainstem from the cerebral cortex. What they had found is that if you do that, then um, you basically so this one compares where we're either cutting below the medulla or between the midbrain and the pons. Um, this one, between the midbrain and the pons, you get slow wave sleep. So you enter this really deep sleep where um, the cerebral cortex is unable to wake the person up from that sleep. They pretty much stay in that state forever. They did this, I think, with rabbits, or sorry, cats. They were unable to wake them back up. They pretty much just stayed in this deep sleep for a long time, finding that a lot of the automatic systems within our pons and brain and medulla that uh, aids in our inactive things such as respiration and heart rate also influences our sleep, and we require our cerebral cortex to give us that consciousness and to wake us up. Oops. Yeah.
Are we skipping? Okay, yeah, sorry. So slow wave sleep is generated in the basal forebrain. And in this basal forebrain, you've got neurons that release GABA when you're sleeping. And this GABA is going to activate receptors on the tuberomammillary nucleus, which is going to activate the sleep mechanism. And these receptors are also stimulated by general anesthetics, so different drugs, which will produce slow waves resembling slow wave sleep. The reticular formation is a pathway in the pons and midbrain, or that starts in the pons and midbrain, that is responsible for waking people up from sleep. If you have a lesion in this area, you're going to have trouble attaining consciousness after sleeping, so you're going to have trouble waking up. And the forebrain and the reticular formation are two systems that are going to work together to regulate slow wave sleep and wakefulness.
So the locus coeruleus, or coeruleus, is where we have our secretion of norepinephrine. It's an area in the pons and is very responsible for our REM sleep. Some neurons in this region are only active during that REM sleep, and they inhibit the motor neurons, and it keeps them from firing. And this is what allows us to shut our body off for that REM sleep. As we said, our brain is active, but our body is inactive during this REM sleep, and so that is why some of these neurons are only active during REM sleep because, again, our non-REM sleep, our body's still active, but our brain is inactive.
So narcolepsy is a condition where people go from being awake to directly moving into REM sleep. So there is no slow wave sleep cycle like the stages 1 through 4 that we saw in the previous slide. And this is terrible for them because they have really intense sleep attacks at random times of the day that last between 5 and 30 minutes. And sometimes they may even show cataplexy, which is a sudden loss in muscle tone, because during REM sleep, as we mentioned, that our muscles will also become paralyzed. And this is a really big problem because these people can't control it, and they'll have frequent sleep attacks at really inconvenient times. That could be really dangerous.
Yeah, such as driving a car. Say you're cooking and you have knives in your hand. Who knows really what the person could be doing, and they honestly don't even know when it's happening. It just occurs, and they wake up and they have to deal with that, and normally they have to live their life in a way of being cautious of what they're doing at all times in case they're falling asleep with what they're doing. So, um, testing this, they found that they're in narcoleptic dogs they found a mutant gene for the hypocretin receptor. Hypocretin normally prevents the transition from wakefulness to directly into REM sleep. So this is what's causing this narcolepsy, that we're going from complete wakefulness all the way to this deep cycle sleep of REM sleep. And if you interfere with this hypocretin signaling, that's what's leading to that narcolepsy. And so when you were interfering with that, we can find that in humans, we actually, um, if the human has narcolepsy, that they're losing these neurons that contain these receptors, and you have to use many alertness drugs to manage narcolepsy in humans, often being a lot of stimulants, which pose a lot of side effects on their own.
And these hypocretin neurons will project to other sleep system centers, such as the basal forebrain, the reticular formation, and the locus coeruleus. It will also project to the tuberum mammillary nucleus and inhibit it, which is going to induce the slow wave sleep. And the hypothalamus also has a hypocretin switch that determines wakefulness and the other sleep stages.
So when it comes to a lot of the sleeping pills, there can be some hypnotic ones and some not, such as some chemicals like if you drink tea, there's L-theanine that aids in sleep. You can actually take GABA supplements. Also, melatonin itself can be taken. And they all act on the GABA receptors in the brain. And remember that GABA is the neurotransmitter that is inhibitory. And so these sleeping pills can actually affect some of the receptor expression and gene expression after taking them, which can persist a few days after use. It can alter your sleeping patterns since you're actually able to get good sleep or altered sleep. However, you do start to build somewhat of a resistance to it, especially something like melatonin. You definitely should be taking that every night because your brain will stop producing the natural amounts of it. Same with if you were to take GABA on its own. Sometimes also, if you take these pills and you don't get full night's sleep, that can lead to daytime drowsiness because you still have active chemicals in your body and you weren't able to give enough time for your body to dispose of it, and so you'll have drowsiness in the middle of the day. And it's also possible that you have some memory gaps. This is because you're possibly skipping certain stages of sleep because you're putting yourself at a prolonged single stage as opposed to getting a natural cycle. Say with a sleeping pill, not sure exactly if you were to have. I think you end up having more stage 3 sleep and you do REM, and so you don't really get so much REM memory consolidation. And so some people can feel like they've got some memory gaps. They don't lose complete memory, but some little bits can go amiss. And sometimes people prefer just to use behavioral methods, which is sometimes difficult to do with narcolepsy, but insomnia. I meant insomnia if I accidentally said narcolepsy in this slide. But insomnia, if you're unable to sleep, sometimes there's some meditations that you can do and some breathing exercises that can actually help get you into some sleep. And a lot of behavioral methods as well means turning off all your lights a few hours before you're trying to go to sleep, not touching your phone and things like that, because that really affects that natural cycle of light, and that stops the melatonin production um, in your pineal gland. So we have some questions, though we don't currently have any participants, but I will set them in about a time that's normal to Kahoots, which is about 20 seconds a question. We'll leave the slide on, and then actually, if you wish to take it, we'll hold it for about 5 to 7 seconds. You can pause it if you want to take some time, but then we'll answer the questions afterwards. Okay, so circadian rhythm usually lasts around circadian rhythm is 24 hours. Circa is the sun, so the sun is about 24 hours, and that's the best way to remember that cycle. Circadian cycle has either longer cycles than the ultradian, shorter cycles than the ultradian, longer than the infradian, or both, B and C. And circadian cycle is a larger cycle than the ultradian. If you remember back to when we were talking about eyes and the wavelengths that we see, the shorter wavelengths are ultraviolet, while the yeah, right? No, ultraviolet is larger. So I guess they don't correlate. Sorry. So just remember that ultra is small and infra is large.
How long is one sleep cycle? One sleep cycle is 90 minutes long, including all the stages and REM. This is a really important number to know, so make sure you know it for your exams and your future. Melatonin is the hormone responsible for inducing sleep, and it is released heavily through the day. Is that true or false? This is false. Melatonin is released by the pineal gland, and it does induce sleep, but it's released heavily throughout the night because that's when you sleep.
So, which of the following is responsible for being a part of the biological clock mechanism? Is that the retinal ganglion cells, retinal axonal cells, olfactory ganglion cells, or the olfactory axonal cells? And remember that the retina ganglion cells are also projecting to our suprachiasmatic nucleus, and that's what's visually seeing the light that is activating our biological clock, letting us know what is day and what is night. Which of the following waves is most commonly used in the wakeful state to complete tasks? So as we are awake, are we currently in beta waves, alpha waves, delta waves, or A and C, beta and delta waves? So while we're awake, we actually are in beta waves. As we close our eyes and start to go to sleep, we go to alpha, then theta, then delta in our slow wave sleep. It is strange that it's beta alpha, theta delta, but that is just how our brain is.
Which of these is mainly present during stage 1 of the sleep cycle? Theta waves. Alpha and beta are when you're still conscious, and theta and delta are during sleep. And stage 1 and 2 will include theta waves, and 3 and 4 which are deeper sleep, will be delta waves. So just remember which waves correlate to which stage.
The stage 1 has theta, stage 2 has theta, and also sleep spindles. And stage 3 and 4 are delta, sometimes because they're pretty much so similar to each other. There's nothing really that's keeping them separate. Some places, and I think in the slides given by the professor, she only includes stage 3. So a lot of people just consolidate those two stages into just stage 3. And for questions, if anyone has any, please feel free to DM us on GroupMe or just into the class GroupMe page itself, and we will get to them as soon as we can. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.